In late June 1907, a local miner walked home from his shift at the number 4 shaft mine. He saw what he thought was a young woman just standing ahead of him on the path that led back to his village. His lamp was nearly dead, and the path was swallowed by dense fog. It was late, and the clouds covered a very small sliver of moon that hung partway up the sky. But through the fog, he could make out that she was small and pale. When he called out to her, she turned and her head twisted in slow, unnatural movements, like something remembering how to move. And then she dropped, not fainting, but falling on all fours and crawling towards him. Through the mud, her tangled limbs exposed. Startled and petrified, he ran, slipping on the slick path, hearing her breath closing in behind him. The smell of sulfur hung thick in the air, and when he reached the edge of the village, he turned back and realized that she was gone. Every year there's at least one sighting of this woman. Someone swears they've seen her, or they've seen lights out near the marsh, near the mine holes, faint bobbing just above the water. And the locals who have been there, they know there's something to fear in the dark, and that those mines should have never been built, because the ocean remembers. Welcome back, spooky souls, to a brand new episode of Let's Talk Spooky. If this is your first time listening, welcome. Here at Let's Talk Spooky, we dive into the creepy, paranormal, and haunted folklore from the most seemingly normal locations, and we cover some downright scary themes and some folklores. If that is your vibe, you're in the right place. In the last couple of weeks, our community of spookies has grown tremendously, and I'm so excited. I love hearing your comments. I love hearing your feedback, so please keep sending them my way. If you have an episode recommendation or something you'd like to hear, please leave a comment wherever you listen to your podcast. And check out our socials like TikTok and Instagram. I always post behind the scenes there, including the recent creepy Annabelle doll that I acquired from an antique market. Also, I will be posting updates about adding to our spooky Christmas playlist. So if you have any themes or ideas you want to see covered, let me know. A couple of weeks ago, I did an episode on the Great Amherst Mystery, which I will link in the description box below in case you want to give it a listen. That episode got such great feedback that I decided to add another little Canadian location that doesn't get talked about too often. So this one is a shout out to my Canadian listeners. You guys are amazing, and I love hearing from you. Tonight, we're heading east, and I mean way east, to the rocky coast of Newfoundland. A place where the fog rolls in thicker than smoke and the stories linger longer than the tide. Bell Island might look like any other quiet stretch of land on Conception Bay. Its small community and red cliffs have a ghostly story attached to them. One that's connected to the iron mines that once were very much a prominent part of Newfoundland's culture. The miners used to say that you could hear voices in the tunnels when power was cut out, and whispers and footsteps as they moved through the mines. And out past Butler's Marsh, some locals still claim they see a figure in white just waiting through the fog. Is she a ghost of a lost soul? A remnant of the island's mining past? Or is she something much older? A spirit of the land itself, a warning of the living maybe coming too close to a land that wasn't supposed to be touched. Tonight, we're diving into the story of the Hag of Bell Island, the strange history that made this patch of rock one of Canada's most haunted locations. So grab your flashlight, pour yourself something warm and cozy, settle in, because this one is as chilling as Newfoundland's winter nights. So let's talk spooky. Bell Island sits quietly off the eastern coast of Newfoundland. The island itself stretches only about 1 kilometer long, but for nearly a century, the world ran on the iron that came from beneath its soil. The first ore was pulled from the ground in the late 1800s, and soon the island itself moved from a fishing village to become one of the most active mining towns in all of eastern Canada. Beneath its ground, a labyrinth of tunnels were carved into the red earth and black rock, stretching under the sea itself. The men who worked these mines said it was like digging into the lungs of the ocean. The tunnels went so deep beneath the bay that sometimes the walls would groan as the tide shifted. The air itself beneath was thick and wet and heavy, and sometimes, if you stood still long enough, you could hear the low sigh as if the island was exhaling. There was a total of 6 mine shafts. Each one was a world of its own. Narrow railways, dripping ceilings, and echoing chambers, where the light never seemed to quite reach. Miners spent nearly 12-hour shifts in the darkness, only illumination coming from yellow flickering lamps. Bell Island's ore was shipped to steel mills across North America and Europe, the same steel that would later build the bridges, ships, and weapons for the war. By the early 1900s, it was said that Bell Island's mines were some of the richest in the world. But we all know that that kind of success comes with ghosts. Over the decades, dozens of men were lost under the grounds of the tunnel due to flooding, explosions, and cave-ins. The tunnels were unpredictable, the ocean pressed heavy above them, and a single misstep could mean water pouring in from the bay and swallowing an entire cavern of men. Families built small houses on the cliff and waited for the sirens, those piercing alarms that would signal that something below them had gone terribly wrong. Women would gather at the mine entrance at the end of shifts, praying under their breath that their husbands emerged, and the faces lit by the lantern glow were the ones that were meant for them. And often, many women lost their husbands, and many families went on to face tragic ends. When the Second World War reached Newfoundland's shore, Bell Island's quiet, isolated community became its main target. In September of 1942, a German U-boat slipped through the fog and into Conception Bay. It torpedoed struck 2 ore carriers anchored offshore, the SS Saginaw and the Lord Strathcona. Both sank within minutes, taking nearly 42 men down with them. The blast was so powerful, it shattered nearly all the homes in the nearby bay. A few weeks later, another submarine returned, sinking 2 more ships and firing on the loading pier itself. It was one of the only times enemy fire ever reached Canadian soil. Bell Island became a place where the sea, the mine, and death seemed to share an understanding with one another. When the war ended, the mines never fully recovered, and by the 1960s, the tunnels were closed permanently, leaving behind empty shafts, rusting carts, and stories that refused to fade away. Locals said that when the last miner left, the island didn't go silent. It claimed that you could hear echoes, rattling of ore carts in the dark, clanging of picks, and the voices of miners that may never have returned from the very depths of the tunnels. Some dismissed it as the wind rushing through old mining vents, but others, like us spooky people, were not so sure. Around the same time, stories began to spread about strange lights moving near the marshland, of a woman's silhouette drifting through the fog at dusk, and of footsteps following who ever walked alone at night. The miners had left, but something else, something much older, seemed to have stayed behind. And before long, the people of Bell Island had a new story to tell, and they called her the Hag. The locals began to call her the Hag of Bell Island, though no one really truly understands exactly what she is or where she exactly came from in the narrative. Some say she might have been a woman who lost her husband on the island, maybe a miner's wife, or perhaps she was a widow of one of the shipwrecks. Others whispered that she was a stranger who came across the water but never truly left. But there is one thing that everybody seems to agree on, that she is there. And at night, when the fog rolls in, she wanders the banks in search of something. The air gets colder and the marsh goes quiet. There's no birds, no frogs, just a stillness that settles. And somewhere deep within that stillness, footsteps begin to appear in the mud. One man said he had seen her while walking home from a shift at the docks. She stood knee-deep in the reeds, her head bowed and her long hair hanging like seaweed. When he called out to her, thinking that maybe she was in trouble or stuck in the mud, she never moved. When he finally called out again, she lifted her head, and that's when he saw that her eyes glowed a pale, eerie yellow. And then she dropped into the marsh, not fading, not falling, but crouching, low and fast like an animal about to spring on its prey. Terrified, he ran, slipping on wet stones, and he didn't stop till he reached the road near town. When he did turn back, there wasn't anything behind him. And this is a common theme for most of the individuals who run into her. It seems that she doesn't pass the town's line, but stays roughly just distances away from the marsh. Some believe she's connected to the marsh itself, a spirit bound to its land. Others believe that Butler's Marsh was once a burial spot that had been flooded during the building of the mines, and bones somehow rose to the surface and awoken perhaps a guardian, or perhaps a warning. But not every single sighting happened at the water's edge. In the 1950s, a young couple reported seeing a woman near the old mine road. They thought she was hitchhiking and the man slowed his car, but the woman vanished right before his headlights reached her, as if she was never truly there at all. A few years later, a group of boys exploring the mine shafts swore they heard weeping deeper into the tunnels. And as they moved through the tunnels, they found something that they couldn't explain. An old mining lamp, still on fire, even though the mines had been sealed for months, if not years. Those who live on Bell Island long enough say the hag isn't one ghost, but a collection of a number of different sorrows that the island itself has faced over the years. The miners, the widows, and drowned sailors, even men lost to war. They're all a symbol that's echoed through her. But, as always, there's always another version to the story. One that younger generations have adapted. And in this one, she's called the Swamp Hag. In this version, she isn't human at all. She's something much older, a shapeshifter, a creature from the days before the mines even existed, before the war, before the island was even named. She's a spirit of the water, the woods, drawn into human grief like a moth to the lantern. Some say she mimics voices, calls your name through the fog. One fisherman said he heard his late wife calling him from the edge of the marsh, gentle, familiar, pleading for his help. He followed the sound until he reached the reeds, And that's when he saw her standing there, pale and still, and it was not his wife. When he called back to her, the voice stopped. Then slowly, she smiled. A smile that was all too wrong, too wide, and as quickly as she appeared, she vanished into the mist. In most folklores, hags and fairies are often blurred together, one born from the other, a shape-shifting of time and entities that have been woven through history that was brought over through settlers from the European colonies. The marshy lowlands of Belle Island, with their lights and mist, are the perfect breeding ground for both kinds of tales to become intertwined into one another. Some folklorists believe the Hag of Belle Island may be actually a modern echo of Old Hag, stories told across Newfoundland of a witch spirit that sits on your chest while you sleep, stealing your breath, a kind of supernatural paralysis demon. And locals blame her for the nightmares that rack our dreams. But others see her more as a unique thread tied into Belle Island's history. A ghost born of grief, kept alive by generational stories of people who couldn't quite forget the island's tragedies. So whether she's a banshee, a bog witch, or just an echo of human loss, there is one thing for certain. Her stories have endured for hundreds of years. Even now, locals say if you stand near Butler's Marsh on a foggy night and call her name, you'll hear her answer. Not with words, but with the sound of footsteps, slow, steady, suctioning through the marsh and the thick fog that surrounds her. And when that happens, don't run, don't speak, but wait. Let the fog enclose you, because if you run, it may be the last thing you do. In honor of today's tale, I thought it would be fun to locate some eerie tales from the island itself. So I'm going to close this episode with 3 eerie tales, and I want you to comment below which ones are your favorite. Story 1 is called The Marsh Walker. I was walking home late at night, taking a shortcut past Butler's Marsh. Even though everyone has told us not to, but sometimes it's the faster way. The fog had come heavy that night, thick enough to blur the tree lines into a single gray wall around me. Halfway through, I heard it, the sound of water shifting, like someone was wading through the shallows. Instantly I stopped, and so did the sound. And then I saw her. A woman standing just in the reeds, the fog wrapped around her like smoke. Her pale dress was almost glowing. But she didn't move. She didn't look up. She just stood there, head bowed, hair dripping. I called out to her and asked if she was all right. But there was no answer. And that's when she turned her head, slow and almost mechanical-like, her neck twisting further than it should have, and then she dropped into the reeds. Not fainting or falling, but just sitting there on all fours. Startled, I started to walk backwards, and that's when she started to crawl towards me, her hands slapping the mud and her breath coming out in low, wet gasps. And then I ran. Faster than I've ever run in my entire life. And when I finally reached the road, there was nothing behind me. There was just fog, thick breathing, and swallowing the earth around me whole. I will never walk there at night again. Story number 2 is called The Sleepless Miner. The first time I went down to the old Wabana mine, I thought of the stories that the tourists had told. You know, the usual ghost talk that comes from abandoned places. But when the guide lanterns flickered, everything went kind of quiet. You don't realize how heavy silence can be until you feel it underground. We all stood there, listening, no voices, no wind, just the sound of dripping water somewhere deep in the darkness. But then a sound did come. Tapping. Slow at first, like metal on stone. But then it gradually grew, steady and measured. The guide froze. I thought maybe it was a reenactment of the group, and it was presented to scare us. But the tapping sound seemed almost too far down into the tunnel to be an actor. And that's when I felt it. A pressure on my chest that wasn't hands, but like a heavy weight. Like someone was leaning right into me and pinning me against where I stood. I tried to breathe. I tried to catch my breath, but the air was so thick, so wet, that it felt like I was inhaling mud. The guide lantern's light came back and the tapping sound stopped, and the weight lifted all at once. When I got topside, the guide said nothing to us. He just packed up everything and we left. Later, one of the locals told me that the old hag, a spirit that sits on your chest when you sleep, was likely what I felt. But it didn't make sense. I wasn't sleeping. But the local said down there doesn't matter, because the darkness makes you feel like you're in a dream. Almost like the mind is remembering you. That was the last time I went down there, and I think I won't be interested in going back anytime soon. Our last story is called The Woman on the Cliff. We were out walking on the cliff one summer evening just before sunset. The fog had started to roll in on the bay, and there was a soft, golden kind of glow to the surroundings. Something that makes you feel like a painting. My partner stopped and said, "Do you see that?" Up ahead, near the curve of the path, stood a woman wearing a white gown. She wasn't moving. She was just standing there, looking out towards the sea. Her dress hung still, though the wind was incredibly strong that night. I remember thinking, wow, she looks too still. Like the air wasn't touching her at all. We called out to her and asked if she was okay, but there was no answer, no reaction. We took a few steps closer, and then she was gone. Not like she walked away or ducked out of sight, because there were no trees around. There was nowhere for her to hide. She was just gone. And the space where she was standing, it almost seemed to glisten for a second. The way that heat looks when it comes off the pavement. We stood there for a long moment, trying to decide what we had just seen, and neither of us said very much. But later that night, we told a neighbor, just casually, "You saw her, didn't you?" He said everybody sees her eventually. The first time, she generally is harmless, a pale woman on the cliff. But next time, she crawls through the marsh. And there is never a third time. That story terrified me, and I swore I would never go anywhere near those cliffs at sunset. Bell Island is a place where the past doesn't quite stay buried. Like the ocean, it moves through the island. Maybe that's why it feels so haunted when you stand along its shores. It's not necessarily the ghosts themselves, but a memory of a time that clings to salt and soil. Every tunnel carved beneath the sea, every home built on the edge of the cliff, and every family that waited for a miner who never came home. All of it leaves an imprint, an echo, and over time those imprints begin to whisper back to us. Maybe through the image of a hag, or a woman in white, or maybe it's just a collection of voices, were sounds carried over the ocean, through the mist, and across generations. The lonely, the lost, and the ones who waited too long. Or maybe her spirit is something simpler. The island itself reminding us that grief doesn't just vanish because we stop speaking about it or we stop talking about it. It lingers like a fog. It reshapes itself like a ghost. And in every retelling, it appears different. The people of Bell Island don't talk about the old hag to frighten people. They talk about her to remember the people who were lost, to keep the memories alive of the minds that took so many of their loved ones, of the war and of the sea and all it tried to erase over time. And maybe that's why stories like this endure. They captivate us because sometimes memories are haunting, and the sound of footsteps in an empty tunnel, or a name carried across the wind, or a light flickering across the marsh. Maybe the ghosts of Bell Island aren't trapped there at all. Maybe they're just still working, keeping stories alive for those who are willing to listen. That's all I have for you tonight, folks. I really hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. And if you did, please take a second to leave a comment or a review, like and subscribe. It helps other curious souls find us, and it keeps our channel being able to create creepy content for you all. Don't forget to check out our socials at Let's Talk Spooky Pod on Instagram and Let's Talk Spooky on TikTok. Be sure to hit that follow button wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you have your own eerie encounter, we are still taking a couple more stories for our listener episode. So send them my way, either through DM or email. Until next time, stay curious, and of course, stay spooky. Tonight's episode was written and produced by me, Shauna, and the team at Let's Talk Spooky. All source material for this episode will be listed in the description box below. If you have your own creepy encounter, please be sure to follow us on our socials or email us at letstalkspookypodcast@gmail.com.